Hey there, and welcome back to the B2B Marketing Asia podcast. My name is Joe Escobedo, and I am super pumped for today's episode. This is someone I've been following for ages now, so I'm really excited to have him on the show. He's a rockstar marketer, best-selling author. He's a rock and roll photographer. He does it all. Like I said, I'm super pumped to introduce today's guest, which is Mr. Jason Miller. Thanks for being on the show, Jason.
Joe, how you doing, man?
Good.
Thanks for having me on. This is cool. I love the LinkedIn Live. You know that. I'm I'm always I love StreamYard, so I'm always running with it. Thanks for
Awesome.
having me.
Yeah, no worries. My pleasure. And as I mentioned, one of the things which you are very well known for is creativity and really pushing the envelope, throughout your entire career, particularly in the B2B space, which is not necessarily known for its creativity. So I know there's so many campaigns and initiatives. I'd love to hear about kind of some of them and dive a bit deeper, but really finding out your process when it comes to creativity and building it out for B2B campaigns.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Anybody who follows my journey knows that I worked in the music business for about 10 years, and I sort of thought this was going to be my calling. But I kind of watched this industry fight digital for so long. By the time they decided to embrace it, the genie was out of the bottle. So I sort of fell into B2B marketing, like a lot of us, I think, did. Right? At no point did I say, "Man, I can't wait to become a B2B marketer." But what I brought with me was B2C experience into a B2B world at a time, and was it 2009, 2010, where it was a very competitive space, a very competitive conversation. People were still trying to figure out, uh, you know, what really good B2B marketing looked like in this digital space with social media sort of coming on board. So I brought this, just the only thing I knew, which was how do I bring this sort of fun, creative, music inspired creativity to a very seemingly boring B2B space. So that's kind of what I leaned in with. And to be honest with you, everything that I learned, there were a lot of things I didn't know. And so the good thing about working at Marketo and moving from the music industry into a B2B role at Marketo, fast moving startup, was we had a bit of a brand recognition thing. So if I had a question, I would literally find the foremost expert I could find, reach out to them and interview them for the blog. But selfishly, I was just trying to figure out these questions for myself. Once I got the best answer, I would explore it, I would test it, I would write about it, and I would find this sort of what kind of a unique creative spin could I put on it. So that's always been the formula. It's how do I learn from the experts, take inspiration, and then sort of take my background and put my own unique spin on it and push it forward. I think that's where I found success and sort of differentiated myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed this about a lot of your initiatives over the years is you've done an extremely good job of leveraging whether it be industry experts or thought leaders or even now rock stars. I'm curious, how do you go about that process? Because, even nowadays, I would love to hear how you got OK Go, which I was a huge fan of back in the day and still am. If those aren't familiar, it's a very famous band. And then you have Bruce Dickinson, you've had, best-selling authors. So what is the process behind getting them on board? Because I know that these are big names, and obviously you're a big name as well. But what is the process behind that?
Well, it's I'm in the boat. If you look at my stuff at LinkedIn and Microsoft and Marketo, I've always tried to do something different. I think the most recent example is, as you mentioned, is This Just Works. And I was thinking, what if you look at all the different conferences, it seems like there's a lot of sort of guests or keynote speakers who were sort of being repetitive, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go the exact opposite. So I thought, who's got global appeal, who's interesting? Bruce Dickinson came to mind. Obviously, I'm a bit biased because I'm a huge Iron Maiden fan. I grew up on Iron Maiden, but the fact that he put out a best-selling book, the fact that this guy, he's a 747 pilot, he's a world-class fencing championship, he's an entrepreneur, he's a cancer survivor. He comes to me as someone that maybe only someone with my bias and my passion for heavy metal would be able to pull him into this space and make it into a really insightful, inspirational sort of keynote. And so that's how I'm always thinking, like, how do I look for something that could inspire people? Even if you're not an Iron Maiden fan, you got to love the story, right? And so in this uphill battle of bringing my music bias and heavy metal to people who don't really like it. It's more about finding those stories that apply universally to everyone that are untapped. And I think Bruce Dickinson is certainly a fascinating example. My wife, for example, not a huge Iron Maiden fan by any means, but we were watching Flight 666, which is the documentary about the band and them touring and Bruce being the pilot. And you can't not like it. And you can't not like Bruce when you hear him speak because he's so inspiring. And OK Go, again, this was me thinking Active Campaign is based in Chicago. Who is a great, not even a band. I wasn't even thinking music. I was thinking who's from Chicago who knows about virality and creativity and could bring it in a very unique way. And so I was so excited. I pulled some strings and called some favors in, and I got the manager's number, and I got on the phone with him, and we talked it out, and I told him what I wanted to do, and he said, yeah, let me go back to the band. And I remember running out my door and working from home to talk to my wife who works at Twilio. And I said, you're not going to believe this. I think we're going to get OK Go to do a keynote session for us. And she goes, oh, we had them last year. So they spoke at a Twilio event and actually built an app on the Twilio platform. So, but it started with, how do I find somebody from Chicago? How do I find somebody who knows about creativity and virality and can give a lesson to marketers and really how to push the boundaries? And then it's sort of, I fell back to that musical background again, which kind of saved me. And I think that's the differentiator. If I didn't have that, who knows, we'd have probably the same speaker that everyone else has.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think definitely your passion for heavy metal and music in general definitely is a consistent thread across a lot of your initiatives and a lot of campaigns. I was going to ask you, the question I was going to ask you, I think you answered it quite nicely, is, what, for those who are not heavy metal fans or rock fans, how do you get them on board? And I think you bring up a really good point in terms of finding out people's stories, finding out that they are a dynamic, personality, not just a one-dimensional kind of role. And I think tying that back to, like you said, the companies, whether it's Chicago-based, having those Chicago roots, or even tying back to something you're very well known for, which is virality and creativity. How do you find people that parallel that in terms of what you're doing?
Again, it's about stories, and it takes me. I go back to the example of when I worked in the music business, when we had an artist who we thought was going to be a big smash hit, right? And we put it out to radio, put out the single to radio. At the time, there was no Twitter or TikTok, of course. But we would put the single out, and radio was everything. And if radio didn't pick up on this single, then the band was pretty much doomed, right? But I would find these songs, and I would play them for my friends, and I wouldn't tell them who they were. And sometimes they were biased. Sometimes like, oh, I don't like that band, or it doesn't matter, because if you hear the song and you have you're open minded about it, then it's sort of green fields on how you accept it and how you interpret it. So we would take bands that would be known for one thing, strip off the branding, and send them to radio, or bands that would be known for one thing who were maybe not had a bias against them or something, or just oh, we don't like that band, or we don't like heavy metal, or blah blah blah. And we would sort of strip out the brand and send it back out. Same music, same artist, and it was, sometimes it would hit. So I think if you strip away sort of the I guess the what people think heavy metal is, or even rock music, and give them just the story that they can connect with without all that context that sort of clouds it up and gives them that preconceived notion that this isn't for me. There's something special there, and that's sort of how I've always thought about it. But yeah, I've always loved playing new music for friends and turn them on to things, and I sort of think the same way around, when I find speakers or content, finding something new to present to somebody in a new context that they may have not looked at in a certain way. And lots of times it fails, but when it does work, it's quite magical.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something I was watching one of your keynotes recently. You, if I remember correctly, you said there are no new ideas, so everyone is borrowing or taking from someone else, and I think they're putting a new spin on it, which I think you've done a great job over the years. I'm curious, for those people you're getting on board, let's say internally, because I think you bring a different flavor to marketing in general. How do you get leadership involved? Is it just because they want the Jason Miller brand, so they're willing to go in different directions, or what advice would you have for people who want to be like Jason Miller or want to push the boundaries but are in a more traditional kind of a space?
Yeah, and this comes up quite a bit. And I'll tell you what, every idea that I've ever had has always had some sort of pushback, right? Because it was a risk. And at LinkedIn, we were encouraged to take intelligent risks, which means that the positive outcome of the risk outweighs sort of any sort of negative reactions. And it's hard to find that balance. But I always empowered my team. I said, let's get the basics done. Here's the stuff we need to do to drive demand, to drive leads, to keep sales happy, to keep the brand moving forward, always on, whatever. But let's each of us carve out time for that one intelligent risk, something that might fall flat, but might also be a hit, right? And so that's how I thought about these things. And it's with the latest This Just Works lunch break, which we did on February 25th. We have another one coming up on March 25th. This is not a webinar. We took a late night style format and put it into a webinar, and people were like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Why would I want to watch this? Well, because maybe you want something different than a webinar, because I feel like a lot of people are complaining that all virtual events are sort of the same. And so we tried something new, and some people liked it, some people didn't. But the people who supported it and loved the idea greatly outweighed any of the couple of people that, we obviously can't make everyone happy. That's the first lesson you learn. And now we're doubling down. We're going to move forward with it. But I mean, I did a monologue. I'm not a comedian, but I worked with someone Tim Washer, who used to write for SNL and Stephen Colbert, and he coached me through it. And it wasn't easy, but we tried to do something different. We brought on Jonah Berger, who wrote the book Contagious. We have a band leader who does live segments that help the show flow. We had a musical artist. We had a live meditation. So we had a lot of fun with this. But I think there are, back to your point, is there are no new ideas. There are just new interpretations or new spins. And I will tell you this, I've never been a marketer who just checks boxes or pushes something out the door just to get it done. Everything that I do, good or bad, I look at it, I say, is this as good as it can be? And have we covered all the bases? Is it informative? Is it inspiring? Is it entertaining? Does it have longevity? Does it have shelf life? So we slow down, we take a break, and we look to do things better, fewer things done better. That's sort of the approach.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I love the whole late night theme. I thought as soon as I saw that, I was like, it's extremely creative and brilliant. I wish I would have thought of that. But I love the way you had like the little pianist doing the backup music and things like that, and it's memorable. And I think that's what a lot of people forget is like, whether it works or not from a financial point of view, it is something memorable. Like it stuck out to me, and I take part in tons of virtual events and webinars. I'm speaking all the time. And I honestly would love to be part of something like that because it is a unique experience. So even for the people taking part on the speaker side, they want to be involved in something unique and different as well. And then on the flip side of the audience, they want something different as well because, like you said, a lot of people are rolling out the same playbook year after year, and it becomes redundant for a lot of people.
I mean, it was fun. It was really fun, but it was incredibly stressful. Like nobody, like I think we've seen brands try to bring this late night style feel to the daytime or to the virtual world, and it's really hard to do. But I found a musician who does this, does some of this work for Howard Stern, who does all the stuff live, and it was incredibly stressful, and it took a lot of work, and it wasn't perfect, but it was as good as it could have been for that first shot. Now we laid the foundation, we tighten it up, we tweak it here and there, we take the feedback, of course, but we move forward with it, and again, but we're still looking for these ideas. How do you find? It goes back to where did the idea come from? And I carry around like I have a digital notebook that I carry with me everywhere, and of course my phone. And every time I see something that I think is interesting or remarkable, or even a copy on subway posters here in London. The one of the biggest campaigns that I ever did, or that my team ever did at LinkedIn, was the Read This series or Read Me series, and that was inspired by I found a photography book in a bookstore. Bookstores are still super big here in London, and it literally I was looking to move away from concept photography into portrait photography, and I found this book that said, literally sitting on the bookshelf, it said, "Read this if you want to take better photographs of people." And I thought, wow, that's exactly what I want to do. And I thought, what if you could just say that with your content? And so we tried that, and we segmented it out at LinkedIn. And that was the birth of the Read read me series. Read me if you want to advertise better on LinkedIn. Read me if you want to blah blah blah. And yeah, we just said what it did on the tin. We stripped away all we stripped away all the creativity that would have been used on the cover, and we flipped it on its head and put it on the inside. So it worked remarkably well, because there was no question you're not going to click on this ad or this content unless you want to do exactly what it says on the cover. So that was another experiment. And the other one that I my favorite story is I was the other part of that was Liam Gallagher, who I'm obviously a huge Oasis fan, was putting on his solo record when I first moved to London. And I remember getting on the tube, and there was a big poster, and I guess they sent out the record for early reviews to New Music Express and Rolling Stone or whatever. And there was a poster, and it said Liam Gallagher's new record. It was black and white. It had his face, and that was it. And it said at the top, it said, "As good as he said it would be." And it hit #1 on all the charts that week. And I just remember, like, that's another thing. Like, how can you, like, some people would say Liam Gallagher has an ego, but I would say after you listen to his work that maybe he's just very confident. So I think, how do you walk that line with content marketing between, not having an ego, but being very confident and also being humble? So that's, but these are things that sort of shape content and shape programs. And every piece of content that I've ever touched, or my team has always been inspired by either rock music, Seinfeld, travel, or some book that I saw in a bookstore.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Seinfeld, because I think I'm a Curb Your Enthusiasm type of guy. So I'm on the other side of that coin, and I obviously love the show. And one of the things that I did recently, just to experiment and be creative, particularly when LinkedIn Stories came out, because I saw some people really just putting out some just snapshots of posts, and I'm like, okay, there has to be a better way to use this platform. So it forced me to make a video. I think it was like 20 seconds or something like that, and I made a spoof of Curb Your Enthusiasm, talking about LinkedIn sales and things like that. And I just did it as a test to see, if anyone would watch. And that really shot up. It's still one of my most best performing videos. And it was just funny, because it goes back to what you're saying. Like, I'm such a huge Curb Your Enthusiasm fan. I don't know if anyone else is, but I was like, okay, I'm going to put this out because I'm super passionate about it. And to your point, it was difficult to make, because I think what people forget is, like, the shorter it is, whether it's copy or whether it's video, the harder it is to do and to make it compelling and make it, something people want to watch. So that was an interesting experiment for me to see the feedback. And even my client at Adobe reached out to me, and he was like, hey, I love the video. So I need to do more of those. I need to get back to that now that I have the team in place. But I think, to your point, you obviously have been one of my creative inspirations. Even the LinkedIn book, I remember seeing that for the first time, and I was asking my network. I said, who the hell created that? And they're like, this Jason Miller. I was like, let me search this Jason Miller character. And then that's how kind of Daniel and I, Daniel Cooley at LinkedIn, we were catching up, and he mentioned the story behind it as well. So I think it's a brilliant idea, like you said, to take inspiration from things you're passionate about. In your case, rock music. In my case, like sketch comedy, and see how you can weave that into it and draw those analogies, because a lot of times it's the same straightforward thing over and over and over. How do you tell the same story but in a different way?
Well, it's are you talking about the Read Me series? Is that what Daniel was talking about? So the coolest part of that whole story is the fact that since we stripped away all the creativity, just had the cover. It literally just said, "Read me if you want to advertise better on LinkedIn," and we split it up by advertise on LinkedIn, drive brand awareness on LinkedIn, and there was one other one. But I wanted to focus the creativity on the inside of it. And so we don't have a huge budget. We don't have a Red Bull sized budget. We got a very modest budget. That was the other thing. People always said, oh, but you're LinkedIn, you have all this budget and resources. And like, no, we had there was 3 or 4 people here in the UK, and then 5 people in the US. We led the project out of the UK. But since it was inspired by the Liam Gallagher poster, I was at a show, photographing a band, and I ran into the guy who designed the covers for Oasis's first 3 records. He was a photographer, and so I started chatting with him at the show, and excuse me, and I reached out to him, and the whole LinkedIn team came over, all 8 of us, or whatever. and we were in the UK for an offsite meeting, a global content team meeting. And so I hired Brian from Microdot, and he came down. He's Oasis's photographer, and he came down. He did a photo shoot with the team, and so he also did a custom photo shoot for the book. And so on the inside of this book, even though there's zero creativity on the outside because it's just a text and typography based cover, the inside was something unique that we never done before. And one of the pieces we actually pulled from Brian's archives, and there was some original Oasis photography weaved into the narrative of how to drive leads on LinkedIn. So I do remember some of the millennials on the team who were like, what if people don't get it? Like, what if people don't get the Oasis reference? I'm like, who cares if they get it or not? Like, it doesn't matter. If you get it, that's a bonus. But like, I think that people were they were sort of looking for something that wasn't there. Is it an interesting piece of content? Is there an interesting story behind it? Is it helpful? Is it entertaining? Check all those boxes again, right? And it did. And it was the fastest downloaded piece of content at the time in LinkedIn history. And and it drove. We made our money back on that literally overnight with the campaigns. So again, I think it's like, don't overthink these things. Have some fun with it. Inject some personality, and do something bold. We didn't know it was going to work. To be honest with you, it didn't even look like it was really on brand either. But there was, there was nothing on that cover.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how did you get that by the bread too? Because I know how that goes.
Yeah, don't get me started with that. But
but no, I think you bring up a really good point, and you kind of addressed my next question, which was around kind of financial results. Obviously creativity is great, and it's nice to have the accolades and the attention and stuff like that. But to your point, I guess a lot of people be wondering, like, what is the financial impact? Because at the end of the day, any of us are running a business, or we're business leaders. We have to report back to the leadership team. And one thing they're concerned with is, yes, that was a creative campaign, but what was the ROI, or what was the impact it had on the business?
There's no question anymore. Excuse me, the technology's there, right? So we moved the LinkedIn business at the time. I was there for almost 6 years. So we went from an MQL sort of model where it was all about gating everything and generating MQLs for the sales team. Well, we shifted away from that to a self-serve model where now we just drive people to sign up for the platform and start advertising themselves. And everything was moved to self-serve, including sponsored content, direct sponsored content, InMail. I mean, you name it. It was all it was all self-serve. So when we took away, when they took away the fact that we didn't necessarily need MQLs anymore, that was gold, because now we could just create content that drives traffic to a point. But again, I mean, even though there's always a balance between usefulness, utility, I guess, as Jay Baer would say, and creativity. So I can't tell you how many times I scroll through my LinkedIn feed and I just see boring ebooks and webinar invites, but it's like there's zero thought that's been put into the copy. There's zero thought that looks like it's been put into the design or the creative. I mean, there's nothing to pull me in. It's just everything looks exactly the same. So again, it's the balance between how do you answer those questions on your customers and prospects' minds? How do you be helpful? And then how do you deliver it in a creative, meaningful way? And so MQLs, gated, whatever you want to do, register for this, register for that, it doesn't matter, as long as it's something that that finds a balance between the two. Is it helpful? Is it useful? Is it entertaining? Back to that checklist. Is it creative? Is it as good as it can be? And so, yeah, I guess... I think that sometimes marketers take the easy way out and just push things out the door to move on to the next, and then forget to literally extract value out of the best content. And I mean, it's a long-winded answer, but a perfect example of this is there was a really great, solid piece of content that the team worked on at LinkedIn. And I remember they delivered the cover and the title, and it was just very vanilla and boring. And so so we put it out there, and it didn't do well at all. So then we took the same exact content, did a fresh, new, very creative, very progressive sort of looking cover, that didn't necessarily look exactly on brand, and we can talk about that if you want. I have lots of thoughts on that, but it drove results. It killed it. It became one of our top pieces of content. So the lesson there is, if you believe in the content and you think it's good, you think you have something valuable on your hands, and you put it out once and it doesn't perform. We've done it up to 5 or 6 times until you get it right. So keep hammering away. Don't move on to the next thing. Just put a new cover on it, put a new spin on it, put a new theme on it. Like, just take the cover and try it again. And it goes back to just like the music business where, this band didn't hit with this song. Let's try another song. Let's strip away the fact that there's any preconceived notions about this band that you didn't like before, or they were known for this power ballad and they were coined as a heavy metal band, and now they're writing pop songs. So whatever. Like, if you believe in the content is good and you think it could break through, give it the opportunity to, and take several shots to do it if you need to.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm going to release the beast on this one, but we'll talk a little bit about kind of on brand, off brand, because I think this is kind of a challenge. And we work with a lot of corporates, and I think some of them are very, very particular in terms of what you can and can't say, which makes it a bit restrictive in terms of creativity. Sometimes it sparks new ideas, but a lot of times maybe it restricts that. So what are your thoughts in terms of, once again, striking the balance between quote unquote being on brand versus trying something that's different, like you said, the README series, which didn't look anything like that specific company's corporate branding. How do you strike the balance between the two?
So there's I have lots of thoughts on this, and the first thing is, I'm all about staying on brand. Brand guidelines are critical; they're important, right? But and I've always said, like with my team, it's give us the goalposts and we'll stay within them. That's fine. I have no problem with that. I think creativity thrives under constraints. Look at my favorite example is the Clash's London Calling, right? So you had Mick Jones and Joe Strummer in the band in dire straits. They were broke. They owed a bunch of money to their record label. They were fighting their record label at the time, 1978, 79. They recorded this in the bass player's mother's garage, right? And they made one of the most monumental double albums of all time. It's iconic. It's one of the greatest pieces of artistic expression in music ever, and it gave punk a new level of notoriety. So I like the fact that there are brand guidelines and goalposts, but I also feel that if you aren't at a certain level, and everything looks the same and everything is seemingly boring, that you're not going to break through to get to that level where things sort of click. And I think at LinkedIn Marketing Solutions, we were always the underdog, right? So LinkedIn proper, with millions and millions of followers, they never shared any of our content because it wasn't relevant to their followers. So we had to scratch and claw and build for everything. So I remember when I started the company page had 13,000 followers. Now it's up to 4 or 5 million, but nothing really happened until we reached a certain threshold. I think it was around 100,000 followers on the company page where everything just started to roll forward. So now, I mean, I think LinkedIn obviously does a great job, and it's such an amazing platform, but LinkedIn has reached that threshold where they can play it safe and still get tremendous results. And I think a lot of people get confused that they can play it safe and get tremendous results. And I don't think that's the case unless you reach that threshold. Also, think about, I get a lot of crap about this analogy, but you look at Radiohead. I loved the first 2 Radiohead records. I thought they lost their minds after that. I don't think they've done anything worthwhile after the first 2 records, right? The Benz was a masterpiece. And they haven't really had any commercial success outside of their original core fan base. Not like they're getting new fans, but they reach that threshold. So anything that the Radiohead or Tom York puts out has a built-in audience that's going to engage with it. But they had to get to that level, and they got to that level by taking risks and doing things that were different and standing out, and trying new things and leading with creativity, right? So same with Dave Matthews Band. I mean, I worked in a record store in college when that first record came out. Dave Matthews can do anything now. They could put out a bluegrass record. They could put out a jazz record, and it's going to sell, and their fans are going to love it. And brands, I think, too often just think that they can magically float into that space. So with the README series and a lot of things we did at LinkedIn, when I was there, I think in the early days of brand building, you have to take risk, and everything can't look the same, or you're going to curse yourself, and you're not going to get to that breakthrough point. So in that case, the logo carries the brand. I think if someone is in your feed and they see the logo and they see a content that might not look exactly on brand, they're not going to say, "Oh my God, this isn't on brand. I'm not going to engage with this content," or "How dare this brand try to put this in my feed." They're going to be curious about it. And again, I think the logo carries the brand in the early days up to that certain point where you reach that threshold, then play it safe. Then, I mean, that's where I tend to go to a different company and try to do this whole thing again. I don't feel safe in that zone where you can play it safe and just put out content. I like to be the underdog. I like to try to break through and try new things. But that's quite a rant. I didn't mean to go that deep.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was a perfect analogy in terms of reaching that threshold. So obviously, it's much easier for smaller organizations to adapt and try new things. As you know, the larger the organization gets, or the larger that threshold gets, it becomes increasingly difficult for a myriad of reasons, whether it's internal approvals, collaboration from different stakeholders. I guess, like I said, easier to do it for smaller. What about for those established ones? How can they, break free and try something new?
That is a good question, and I used to get this all the time. So with at LinkedIn, and I'll give all my examples from LinkedIn because we had such a fun time there, and the brand and everyone was so cool. I mean, I absolutely love working at LinkedIn, and they're still doing such remarkable stuff. And they did move me over here and gave me a chance to build a team, and so I can't say enough good things about LinkedIn and how great the marketing is there. But where I found success with the team was we would focus on sort of the sophisticated marketer was the first piece we did. Was we focus on, it was about 70 to 80% was the safe, the safe content that was, very buttoned up and answering questions and driving leads and driving MQLs. And then that other, 20 to 30% was where we tested little things. So like James Altucher says, like lots of tiny experiments, right? And so we were always doing these little tiny experiments and testing things to see if we could get some traction. But we never forgot about the core. It's like sales enablement, driving leads, we always had that always on engine with the safe stuff, the 70 to 80% content. But the magic really happened in that smaller percentage with the intelligent risks. And once we got some traction, we didn't really, this is the other thing, we didn't really tell everybody what we were doing all the time, to be honest with you. But we always knew that we led with the brand. We stayed away from controversy. Of course, we played it very safe when it comes to what the brand voice and tone was, of course. But again, with those those constraints becomes opportunity. So once we found something that got a little bit of traction, we would build out a small story and then drive and then pull the results too. So, for example, the magazine, when we launched the magazine, the Sophisticated Marketers magazine, we didn't really tell anybody we were doing that, and until we had a story to sell back to the larger organization. So it was launched in EMEA, a very small launch, but we tested it out and we got some results, and it was actually got great feedback from everyone who touched it. It was actually driving leads. So we brought the story back and we painted this picture to the rest of the team. And next thing you know, it was a global piece. And so every time we tried to do something new, and there's countless times where it failed, right? And then we just kind of swept it under the rug and didn't tell anybody about it. But once we got a little bit of traction on a really unique story or a unique project, we would build up the story and we would present it back to the global team, and we would paint the picture. So I would find it very hard to believe that if you took your time with an intelligent risk and you built the case and you had the data and then you painted the picture to leadership, that anyone would say no to a good idea that's been proven in a small circle, and then you just need to build it out. So I that's where I found success, and that's where I continue to find success.
Absolutely. It reminds me of that old saying, was it ask for forgiveness, not for permission? And I think that reminds me of kind of what you guys were doing in the early days, is kind of going in stealth mode, creating these things to smaller audiences. And then to your point, that is a far more compelling argument or case to make internally. I think it goes back to how you sell this internally, because it's really, really tough. I think particularly in the stuff that you're doing, and I think what we're doing with my team is is to push new things without kind of the data, because like you said, it's untested, it's different from anything that's been done. So you can't be like, okay, this company has done it, because it doesn't make any sense. But to your point, doing a smaller example and then showcasing some of the results from that, I think are a great way to highlight it and bring it on board to other regions and other departments.
Yeah, and I think the other piece of that is, and I probably need to find more time to do this, but I'm constantly curious. I'm constantly learning things, and I'm constantly like, I go down the rabbit hole. If I see something, I mean, that's the problem. I spend way too much time researching and trying to figure something out on my own. But I think I'm in my LinkedIn feed, and if I see something remarkable that's getting a lot of engagement, or something that just inspires me, I save it and I go back to it and I try to figure out, why did that work? Why did I love it so much? But not only that, like, you share it with your audience, say, check this out, celebrate that person, and that's all about building your network. And the biggest secret to my success would be, I think, would be my network. I've never been hired at a job that I applied for. It's always been through networks and referrals and friends and people that I respect their work, and vice versa. So yeah, how much time are you spending in LinkedIn or in Twitter or TikTok or whatever the hell you use, and sharing others work that inspire you? I think that's sort of a lost art as well. Everyone sort of gets in this world of, oh, I'm only going to share my own stuff or my own work, and that's not how you build a network. That's not how you build a following. That's not how you build trust. So I'm getting much better about this, but I save so many things in my feed, and I go back and I look at these and I think, what a remarkable piece of work, or what a remarkable person, or is even someone that I probably need to catch up with. And with the lockdown, it's been lots of Zoom calls, and it keeps me inspired and keeps me pushing ahead, but it also validates my thinking, right? So the other piece of I'm probably talking too much, but the other thing that I've learned over the past couple of years is that you can't do this on your own, and sometimes you need to ask for help, and not only to validate your thinking, but also to build a connection and ask for favors and ask for help. So I think there's a lot of marketers who try to do this on their own, or maybe are afraid to ask for help, or maybe think that it's a hit on their expertise or their ego, and I think it's quite the opposite. I think it shows vulnerability and kind of lifts the whole ship.
Yeah, definitely. I know, I love your point. Like I said, I think you have an incredible network. It's definitely showcased over the years, and I think hopefully been beneficial to what you're doing. But I think it's a very good point for anyone listening to this or watching is the power of a network. And even for me, before I had my audience now, what I used to do is I would go to people's profile that I like. So I was a big fan of Aaron Orendorff, who was he's an amazing copywriter in the States, and I just messaged him and I was like, hey man, I love this piece you did so much. And then we just kind of kickstarted a friendship from there, because it was, a mutual admiration, more my admiration on his side, but eventually a mutual. So it's interesting. And even for the podcasts we're doing now, like I said, I tend to interview people that I find fascinating, that I find very inspirational. And like I said, that's why I was very excited to have you on the show, because definitely one of those people that I've been looking at over the past few years and seeing, gosh, he keeps trying new things. And I'm like, why did I think about that? That's always the best mark, is like when I look at it and I think, why did I think about that? So I think credit to you and the team, Jason, for doing that over so many years.
Well, I mean, I do this. I do the same thing, like, all day long. I'm like, I see marketers, and I'm like, why didn't I think of that? Or what a brilliant idea. And Joe, I mean, like, the reason I was like, oh, you asked me to come on the show, I'm like, absolutely, because I know who you are. I think you do a great job with personal branding and building and networking and content. So I think you do a fantastic job, and I was immediately knew who you were and recognized you, and was like 100%. Yeah, I would love to come on the show. So yeah, I think you're a great example to follow, and someone I look up to and get inspired by as well.
Well, thank you so much. I'm blushing. I don't think I can top that. So, Jason, like I said, I really, really appreciate you spending this time with us and sharing your insights and stories. I found it extremely helpful. I guess the last question is, how can people get in touch with you and find out what you're up to and all that?
Yeah, so feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just say just put a little note in there where you heard me or saw me or whatever. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at Jason Miller CA. Instagram, Jason Miller CA. Most of my photography stuff on Instagram. all my business stuff on LinkedIn, and Twitter somewhere in between. And playing around with TikTok and probably not going to do much with that, but that's where you can find me. Yeah. So and I'm an active campaign right now. I've been there about 8 months, loving it. Such a great company, great story, and again, an interesting place to be, where it's how do we build the brand to to accelerate it to where the product is. So and working with Maria Pergolino, who hired me on at Marketo, I guess about 10 years ago. So
wow. Wow, incredible. I love how it all comes full circle eventually.
It really does, and it's about just staying on top of your network, staying engaged, and staying creative.
Absolutely. Well, Jason, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show again.
Joe, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for watching and listening to today's episode. I know you found it helpful. I won't ask you if you found it helpful. I know you found it helpful. So do feel free to share it with all your people in your network, your colleagues. So many great insights. So thank you guys so much. Stay safe. Take care. And we'll see you soon, guys. Later.